All right, this is Uncle Ivan here with a story of the week. NOLA stories, true stories. Um, here's this. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about a guy by the name of James Booker. He was one of the characters amongst thousands of characters that walked the streets or had graced New Orleans with their presence and their existence. So James Booker, he was also a funny cat, and not only one of the greatest piano players ever. And so my mom went to high school with James Booker. My dad went to grade school with him, and I heard stories about him as a kid, and I had heard about him. The infamous James Booker, the amazing piano player, flamboyant. He had a little, he was a little. I guess back it was before the term androgynous was around. He was kind of had something like that going on, if you know what I mean. All right, so that has nothing to do with the story, but I'm just saying that's kind of who the guy was. All right, but and he had one eye. He had a patch on his over the back the way the I don't know. There were stories about how he got his eye kicked out or something, pissed somebody off somewhere. Anyway, he had one eye, wore a patch on the eye. Very flamboyant, amazing piano player. New Orleans treasure, but a funny motherfucker. Um, so I would see him as a youngster. He would stop by the house here and there, and he would play our piano. Maybe if my mom was cooking, my mom would feed him or something. Or not that he was needed food or anything like that. He wasn't like a transient or nothing. He was just kind of family to us. So he'd stop by the crib, and then and funny thing was he would have a cab. I don't think he drove. I don't even know that he knew how to drive. But he would have a cab driver pull up. A cab would pull up, and he'd hop out the cab, and then he'd commence to coming into our house. And if there was food, he would eat some food possibly, or he would play the piano. And we'd all stand around watch him play the piano. And it was a sight to behold. He was the most, like I said, most amazing piano player I've ever heard. But in this cab would just be sitting out there. So I later found out that this was his car for the day. He had obviously made some money recently. He had just come back from Europe, where he was highly appreciated over there, and highly sought after. And he made a little money when he went to Europe. The reason why I'm saying that is because you could also see him at the Maple Leaf on some given nights with maybe 10 people in there, watching this genius play. But when he went to Europe, he was appreciated, and he made a little money. So chances are, when you saw him pull up in a cab, and the cab's waiting for him, he's got some dough, which I was happy about, because he would some of those times he would lay $100 bill on me, which I was like, oh, cool. So now he goes in our house, we playing a little piano, we watch him, and then he might go. Cyril at the time, my uncle Cyril Neville was living next door. Uncle Chin was living next door, and he and Booker were quite they were quite close as well, and they were both kind of wild and crazy, if you get my meaning. And he would maybe go over to Cyril's house as well at some point after playing piano with us over at our house. He'd go over to Cyril's, and they were doing some other kind of stuff. 70s drugs. I ain't gonna say no more. I don't know. Whatever they were doing, it maybe took a minute. Cab driver's still out there. He'd get in the cab at some point, and he'd go on his way. So I think maybe he was giving this guy something like 50 or $100, $100, and the guy was driving around all day. So I'm gonna get to the story. Now James Booker, like I said, was a character. There was a time when he appeared somewhere on the street, and he had a police uniform on, and I mean a fucking police hat, the full-on thing. And the badge, everything. And he had some aviator cop glasses. And where the bad eye was, he had glittered out that eye. Instead of the patch, he had the aviator cop glasses with the glitter on the bad eye, which was some funny looking shit. And he said it was known. It was known around town that you might see Booker in a police uniform because I think I asked my mom. I said, Mama, I think I saw Booker with a police uniform on. She says, yeah, you know what? I think his sister's husband is a cop. So he didn't snuck and stole this man's one of his police uniforms, and he's parading around the streets in a full-on cop gear, minus the gun, the belt, the badge, all this shit. And so we were at a club back in the days. It was a club called Jimmy's. We were up at Jimmy's, and we had a band called Uptown All Stars, and we had been practicing or something, and we were in the back of the club, and we were back there smoking some weed, and the front of the club was near the bar was near the front door of the club, and then Nick Daniels, who plays in Dumpster Funk, my current group, if you don't know, you'll find out at some point about that band. But anyway, so this is the story. Nick Daniels is standing by the bar. Now, Nick knows who Booker is, but he does not know Booker. So when we're back there smoking weed, and then I see a guy in a cop's uniform walk in the door. Now, I know it's Booker. I say, oh, look, it's Booker. Nick does not know it's Booker. He doesn't know who Booker is. He knows of Booker, but he has never met Booker. So I look, and Booker's talking to Nick, and I think Nick rolls into his wallet and shit, and I think Nick's showing him ID or some shit like that. I'm like, what's going on? So then Nick comes over where we are. He tells us, man, y'all better put that weed out. Man, there's a cop over there. You saw him harassing me? I'm like, man, that's not a cop. That's James Booker. That's Booker. So we were laughing. We were dying laughing at Nick. Nick was duped by Booker. He thought Booker had come up to Nick, and from what he told us, Booker said, let me see your ID. And Nick pulled out his ID, and he gives him his ID, looks at his ID, and he gives him his ID back and says, you're a good bass player, and that's it. So we're cracking up. We're dying laughing. He don't know that that's Booker. So further on, a couple of weeks later, Booker had added a billy club to the arsenal. So now he's a cop uniform walking around with a billy club. This is about a 2-month period where he's notorious, and there's word on the street you might see Booker with this cop uniform on at any time, and he's now added a baton, a billy club. He might, to look more like the cop. Next thing you know, he adds a starter pistol. Now I heard a word on the street was now Booker has a gun to go along with his cop uniform. So he's got a gun that shoot blanks, And I think he had pulled the gun out somewhere at the wrong place around the wrong people, and he shot the gun up in the air. He ended up being arrested for impersonating an officer. And shortly thereafter, there was a music magazine that was the equivalent of Offbeat that we know now, the New Orleans monthly music magazine. It used to be called Wavelength. Shortly thereafter, he was on the cover of Wavelength, and after all this shit happened, and he had gotten arrested, and everybody knew about it, and it was the laugh, the talk of the town, and he was on the cover of the Wavelength magazine in a pair of briefs, drawers, underwear, so a pair of drawers, a billy club, and a cop hat. And that's a famous picture. And a matter of fact, the cutout cardboard stats thing at the Maple Leaf of Booker with the drawers on and the cop hat, that's where that comes from that cover of the Wavelength magazine. So if you ever go to that, if you ever see that little cutout of Booker with the drawers and the cop hat, that's from that 2-3 month period where Booker was parading around impersonating an officer and scaring the shit out of Nick Daniels and having a bunch of us laugh our asses off. So that's all I got to tell you for today.